Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this live stream, episode 9 of Building the Space Shooter game. So we ended our last session with some reflections and a plan for the road ahead. Now, I want to mention that the last thing I said was I wanted to make sure that the importing format for all player objects or game objects in general, coming from Asset Forge into Godot Engine or from anywhere into Godot Engine should be standardized for this game. That everything needs to have the same up orientation, forward orientation, and so on, right? Rotation, scale, all of it. And then I also wanted to standardize controls and make things as modular as I could possibly do. So let's start with that. Now, the last thing that I've done before working on code again during our live streams was to create the mining vessel. And I am actually happiest with the way that the mining vessel was exported and then imported into Godot. And the other two, I am not as happy with because I had to do tweaks, rotation, scale, positioning, adjustment, messing with textures and materials, all of it. It was not a seamless import process as the mining vessel was. And so now what I want to do is I want to go back to Asset Forge and export the player ship and the enemy ship again in the same format that I exported the mining vessel. And then I'm going to go back to the individual scenes for the defender ship, the pirate ship, and the mining vessel, and confirm that they are all facing the same way, they are all oriented in the same way, they all have the same scale. And then when I put a player controller setup in each of them and then put them into test flight scene, that they behave exactly the same way. And by doing that, I can, in theory, I can actually go ahead with the. Give me 1 second. I'm just checking something. Right. So once that's done, I can then make sure that. Just gather my thoughts. Yes. Right. Then once I've done that, once I've gotten all of the import, all the main objects imported correctly, I can begin to separate the player script into modules. And you might be thinking that this is a very repetitive process, and you'd be right. And the reason for that is because I haven't been sticking to good principles from the start, which was bad, and I shouldn't have done it that way. But the damage is done, and now it only needs to be repaired. And the best way to repair it is just to separate the script into pieces that I can control separately, right? And the best way for me to do the controls, well, like I mentioned in the last lesson, in the last live stream, I mentioned that I want to give each of the versions, right? Each mode, mining mode, defender mode, pirate mode. I wanted to give them all the same basic first-person controls. So if I move the mouse in a certain way, it should behave the exact same way, regardless of the player's mode. And the only things that would vary would be speed and like delay or response rate, or making fine-tune adjustments, right? So how responsive is it? How nippy or how sluggish? How speed, like how fast the thing moves through space, or how slowly, and how quickly something can fire a projectile, right? So fire rate and precision and damage factor and all of these things are modifiable on purpose, because I want the player to have a slightly familiar experience with controls, but an overall different experience for each mode, right? So for the pirate mode, you want to feel like this really fast and agile attacker, right? That can, swoop in and cause damage and then swoop out again and then come back and collect the spoils later or whatever. And for the defender, you want to have some kind of middle ground, right? So let's come back to him, because you need two extremes for a middle ground. So the other extreme would be the mining vessel. You want this tank almost, right? And it goes through space like a tank. It's solid and slow and deliberate. And then it collects the resources from the asteroids or whatever other mining objects they are. And then it makes its way back towards the capital ship. And its routes are direct and deliberate, and they aren't all over the place, which makes them the ideal target for an agile and nippy attacker, right? So in the middle, you have this defender, right? Someone who is capable of moving in convoy with a miner vessel, right? So it's able to move slowly with a miner vessel in those direct and deliberate pathways. But as soon as a pirate is spotted or has started attacking, it can quickly switch modes, right? So it's just like snap out of it and start pursuing. And it can actually pursue the pirate ship. It's fast enough, it's agile enough, but it's also got more armor and it's got more firepower. So a pirate vessel, remember, has storage without mining equipment, which means that it doesn't have enough space, or it had to make sacrifices and trade-offs, right? That the resources going towards storage were taken from the resources that could have gone towards increased firepower or hull protection or whatever. And remember that these guys are scavengers, so they don't have like top of the range technology and materials. They get what they can find and put it together into something that can function. So their armor isn't as good, their firepower isn't as good, they don't have mining equipment, but they do have storage. And because they haven't invested in like super heavy armor or whatever, they're able to move faster and can have faster turnaround times. Excuse me. And then, yeah, so that's the reason for these variations. The deliberate variation in movement speed and attack power and all of these things. But these are all variables, right? And It has nothing to do with the underlying logic. And if the logic is the same across all modes, right? So movement is the same, the controls and handling the controls and all the if statements and conditions and everything is the same. Then why should I modify it in 3 different places every time I want to make a change? That's the whole point of modular code. And so now you hopefully understand exactly why I'm choosing to do things this way. And for those of you who were with me from the start, thank you for bearing with me through this explanation. I appreciate your patience. So let's go back to Asset Forge, the only application I never thought to switch on before the live stream. So if you're noticing something different, I changed the background to be more relevant. It's the space background. Now let me open the player ship. All right. So as you can see, front, side, and top. And if I adjust the view, that's the general orientation. And if I say Control A and move it up, we can see that the general orientation is the same as the forward orientation of the editor itself. Let me switch back to live stream. I noticed that I'm still in PowerPoint view. Okay. So there we go. You can see the forward arrow there, and the ship is facing forward. And up is up, and forward is forward, and everything seems okay. What just happened? Oh, I see. It undid my import. Okay. So this is the player ship in Asset Forge. Okay. And what I want to do is export this again. So I say File, Export Model as an OBJ merged blocks in Godot merged blocks. Export as an OBJ with Y is up enabled. Yes, indeed. Because Godot is different to Blender. Blender has the Z axis pointing up, and Godot has the Y axis pointing up. It's a subtle difference, but it's important enough to cause problems. So if we export it as an OBJ, I've noticed that it exports with all the colors intact. If I export as a GLTF, the materials come like washed out and not the same, and I don't like that. So let's do this. We'll export as an OBJ file in the folder. So if I go to the folder, just give me a second. Okay, models. I'll create a new folder. So I'll put this back into the screen for you guys to see what I'm doing. No. No, you need to cooperate with me now, Windows. Thank you. Ugh, okay, fine. I'll just do it off screen. That's not correct. So Defender vessel Defender ship full body Save. Okay. So now I can export everything excluding the guns, and then I can export the guns separately if I want to. So for example, if in Godot engine I decide that I want the gun to feature somewhere else on the body of the ship, right? So let's say I don't want the guns to be on either side, but I want it to be in the middle underneath or on top. I don't have to continuously export or repeatedly export from Asset Forge. All I need to do is select everything and then deselect the things I don't want. So select all, then deselect very specific sections. Of the player ship, like that. That and that. That and that. Okay. So now I can say file, export, model, selection only. Export. Change the name to have the suffix no guns. Save that. Okay, then come back to Asset Forge and then export with guns only. So there and there. Export model, same thing, but this time change it to guns only. I changed it to gun only because remember, if I want 2 guns, I can just duplicate this and I can have 3, 4, 5, 25, however many I want. As long as it's just 1. Because if it's 2, then you can't divide it into 1. It's no longer divisible in that way. Okay, so that's the player ship done. Let's switch to... Don't save. The pirate ship. And there it is. So, in case you were wondering, this is what the pirate ship should have looked like. This is what it should have looked like. From Asset Forge, this is how I designed it to look. You can see it's a lot more striking and intimidating. But when I go into Godot engine, because I exported it, don't worry about that discoloration, we'll fix that soon. So when I go to the pirate ship, look what happened. The darks are not dark, the reds are not red, and everything is awful. There's no other way to put it. It's just awful. And I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is re-import this Lone Star Proxy 2 into Godot engine. And then I'll, change all these things later. So kind of like this, right? So you've got the mining vessel of collision shape 3D and the mesh instance, which is the actual ship. So let's fix that. Okay, so we export this thing as an OBJ. So Control A, you can see the orange outlines are grouped, right? So if I select the skates, they are grouped. And perhaps that's not the best decision. If I choose the guns, that's grouped, which is good. But grouping these two together is not good, because again, it's indivisible once you export it, whereas this is divisible. Well, I mean, it's indivisible, but it's multiplicable, right? So I can expand it to however many I want without I've already explained it, so I don't need to go into the details again. File, export model, not selection only. And then we'll find the project folder in assets, models, create a new folder called pirate ship, and then call this thing pirate ship. Full body. Okay. Then again, we select all and deselect the guns. Okay, fine. Okay, so it seems like grouping items doesn't seem to help. You see this? Come on. Okay. Select all, then we deselect the guns. That. Okay. And then we'll take the do we want to keep the skis? Keep the skis or don't. We'll keep them. Why not? Export the model, selection only. And then rename it pirate ship, no guns. No guns. Save that. And now we export guns only. So this and that. Nope. This. No. Just that. And that. And that. Okay. And then we say export model, selection only, and call this gun only. So one gun, only one gun. And save that. Okay. So now, if I go to Godot Engine, it's imported the stuff. Now let's go to the file, Defender ship. Forget about that one. We'll go to the Defender ship. And then we can move the camera under the ship instead of the player. And we can change, also put the crosshair under the ship root. Save things. Go to test flight and give it a run. Make sure everything is fine. No. That's because of the the node path. That's fine. What is this supposed to be? A controls hint label. I thought I put this. Oh, you know what I did? Didn't I do this for the mining player instead of the player? Yes. There. Right. This is why making the code modular is important. No worries. We'll solve it. First thing we'll do, though, is we will fix this. Delete the node. Don't worry, we'll sort this out. So now we add in a mesh instance 3D. Move that about there, and then add in a mesh. So if I go File, Defender Ship No Guns, there. What's it complaining about? Oh, okay. So why is the scale messed up? I thought I said scale is 100. So what, does it need to be 1,000? 10,000? Bizarre. Anyway. What I can do though, if I check, this one is facing the right way. So I can go back to player and turn it around. And then re-import everything. But why? There's no point. If I go to the mining vessel, check the mesh instance transform, everything is facing the right way. Okay. That's annoying. Fine. Open, don't save. then deselect the guns. Right, so that and this, that and this, and then we say File, Export Model, Selection Only, and then I go and find the project folder. Full body, no, with guns only. Save and replace. Okay. Then select all, repeat the process. Same thing. Full body, save. Yes, replace it. And then gun only. So you and you. File, export, gun only, save, replace. Done. Everybody happy? I hope so. Now if I go back here and I revert the rotations, everything's fine. Good. So then I can say focus and then so this is set up on the origin. But it's easier to move the mesh instance back. So let's just do that. Move the mesh instance back until everything is aligned nicely. So let's do something like this. And then find the collision shape 3D and observe from the top, I think is better, where the extents should go to. So up to about that. I see. Okay, fine. Let's fix that. Something like this. And then move it along the z-axis backwards. '85. Nice and tidy. Okay. And then viewed from the front, I mean from the side. I see. Okay. Fine. Just do that. So why don't I just move it down a little bit? No. Okay, for now that's fine. You know what? It's fine. What we can do later is add a convex, what they call a convex hull or a convex collision shape around the player's ship, because a capsule is not ideal. As you can see, there's a lot of empty space here that will register as a collision. So if a pirate ship decides to fire here underneath where there's clearly nothing, it will still count as a hit, which isn't realistic and it's not fair, right? So if you, for example, were playing in a multiplayer session with two human players, right? You're playing as the pirate and they are playing as the defender, and you decide to fire here, that's not fair to them. Or let's flip this around. So they are the pirate, you are the defender, and they decide to fire at you, and it seems like they've missed, right? They shoot here, but it still counts as a hit. That's not fair. So what we want to do is change this collision shape, but we'll not worry about that right now. See, what we'll do is we'll go here, we'll change it to convex polygon 3D. Okay. The problem with doing it this way is now you have to define each point of that collision shape either manually, or you have to define it and then export it as a mesh and then import that mesh. And it's an involved process we don't have enough time for. Okay. So now if I save this, and for bullet spawners, what I can do is add a mesh instance below them. So if I go into the script, I want to see which one is actually firing. I have a bullet spawner left and a bullet spawner right, and a plasma bolt scene. And if I go to the shoot function, can shoot, shoot, shoot cooldown, add a bolt, from the left gun. Okay, so it's from the left gun. That means in 3D scene, I want to add a gun mesh to bullet spawner left. So let's do that. A mesh instance 3D below bullet spawner left. And then under the file system, I can just add this. And then focus on it. And put the gun wherever I want to. Can make it a belly mounted gun. Something like that. Okay. So if I click on the camera, then there's one gun. The problem is the bullet spawn is up here, the gun's down there, and in runtime the bullets are gonna fly there, out from here. Okay, so what if I did this? I said I move the mesh instance 3D. Well, no, I move the whole thing like this, focus on it, and then move the mesh instance all the way back like this. And then from the front view, just move this until the bullet spawner is dead center, which it is more or less, which is fine. Now we move the whole thing. Move the whole thing until the gun is in the right spot. So let's do that. Let's see from the side. Move the gun more or less like this or like that. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Oh yeah, that's the old crossing. Do we need that? No, we can delete that. We don't need it anymore. Right. So the code isn't going to work. We can just accept that. When we run the game, it's just not going to work. But we've got about 15 minutes left on the live stream before the hour is up. So let's fix the pirate ship, right? Luckily for the pirate ship, we've only got the bullet spawners attached to the model. So let's just toss that up here, delete the entire ship model, and import the new and improved version. So we go here, and there it is. Nice and rich in its appearance. Much better. So I can add a mesh instance 3D node and then attach the no guns version here. Okay. Now we can adjust the, this is better. We don't need the background sky, especially if we're trying to adjust collision shapes that are so difficult to see against the blue sky. So let's do this. Okay, we move the, where's the camera? Oh, this thing doesn't have a camera. It's not a playable ship yet. We can do that. But I don't want to until I've modularized everything. And I've explained why, so I'm not going to get into that again. So we'll move this down to go inside, or enclose, I think is the better word. To enclose the enemy. Okay, that's good enough. It covers everything, or mostly everything, as tightly as possible. There aren't many places, like here, or maybe there, where you could fire at this enemy and it won't seem to have hit, but actually count. Whereas the player's one is a lot more airy, in quotes, you know? So, Right. Luckily for our case, if I go here to the enemy ship behavior, it's got a left gun and a right gun set up. But I don't think it has a fire script function yet. So let's just double check this. Ready, process, accelerate, seek, shoot. It does have a shoot. Okay. So it's got firing for left and right guns. Do we want both guns? Is that something that makes sense for a scavenger ship? For a ship that scavenges things and, you know, patches things together like this with scraps. Firstly, can they afford to put 2 guns on each of their ships? And secondly, do they even have enough ammunition to supply both guns? I don't think so. But where would you mount the gun? If not on the sides? On top? Maybe. Underneath? The landing gear is kind of the limiting factor here. If I put the gun at the bottom like I did for the player, it needs to be higher than the skis, because how is it going to land otherwise? And then also it can't extend further beyond the skis because the skis need to be like the last extent. If it hits as it's landing, it should like skate. Like as you can see, it should hit something and then skate over the corner or whatever, right? And if the gun is sticking out further than that, it's just going to make things difficult. So perhaps on top then. Okay, let's do that. Let's put the gun on top. So under bullet spawner, just bullet spawner. Let's move the X and Y locations to 0, 0. So it's on the Z axis. And then move it back. Well, no, let's not do that yet. Let's add the gun to it first. Okay. So now we can call this main body. Or we can say mesh dash main body. So we know that that's the mesh for the main body. We can call this mesh dash gun. So we know that that's the gun mesh. Okay. And then add the gun mesh to the gun. Gun only. Why is it not correct? File open. Don't save. Okay. If I select the gun and export selection only, and then I go and find the project folder. Yes. And then I switch back to Godot engine. Now we have a gun only. Excellent. So let's do that. And move the bullet spawner into the open so I can see my adjustments. Now I can move this right up against it. And then move this up. Just move it off to the side so that I'm not obstructed. Okay, so that means this thing is off by some margin. So let's change that. It's the X transform. Something like that. Okay. And now we can move the bullet spawner this way. Centralized and then verticalized. Okay, so it seems that this roof scoop thing is causing problems. Unless I just move it down and out. Maybe. Yes, I know it looks very strange, but bear with me. I have an idea. It might work. It might not. It might look horrible. But let's scale this down to half the size. And now shift it into its position. Something like that. Okay. You know what? Let's just ungroup these. Save it. And now just export this as the gun instead of with this irritating scoop. Okay, so that means I need to say control all, ungroup those, ungroup those, ungroup those. Save that, and now select everything, deselect the gun only, just see something. If I hide that, how does that look? Not good. So why don't we change this? Find a way to make these look nice. Otherwise, what I could do instead is just delete this fin. Or I can duplicate it and then shift them towards the sides. And then the gun can go in the middle. Why do we do that? Okay, so we save it like this. We say select all. Why is that still grouped? Save, select all, then deselect the gun, each gun. So this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, and now we can say file, export model again to be no guns, save, replace. Now if I open up Godot Engine, you can see that the changes are made, right? And now I can move this gun further back. But first, we can shift the scale to half the size because that's way too big. And then move this back. Something like that. And move that down. To do something like this. .4. Third of the scale. Or we can just do this. Hang on. This gun is rotated weirdly. Okay, you know what? We've reached an hour. I'm gonna fix this off camera because it's really fiddly and time consuming. So by the next live stream, I'm going to try and fix this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this piece and turn it right back to face the right way and extend it all the way towards here so that this looks like one piece and it belongs where it should be. And then we can move on to doing modular code, right? So separating all the things into its different components, right? So there's a first person camera controller, then we have the gun controller, and we have the health controller, and we have all of these components that are separate and work together. And then we can move on from there, right? Because then we've built the foundations, and anytime we want to come back and make those changes, it's one place. You make the change once, and it applies to all three versions, right? All three player versions. They all control the same way, and if you change the controls, it affects them all the same way. You don't have to make three separate changes and then forget a line somewhere and have to fix it later. It's not the good practices. Okay, but anyway, thank you all for your time and attention and for joining me on episode 9 of this DevVenture, and I'll see